simply put, it's, the where clause is some kind of column name, and then some kind of operator, and some value, right? So some column name that comes from the table, some operator, and then some value, and that's the condition. What if you want to add more conditions? What does that look like, and how does that affect how your data displays? So this is where you don't put where all the time. You put where one time, and then if you want to add any other conditions, you just add the word and then that's where you can keep adding more. So this is condition number one, and this is condition number two. So you can add multiple. You can go with as many as you want. But just keep in mind, the more you add, what does that do for your data? So let's take this example. And I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the number of rows that show up. So we're going to start with your simple select. And I'm just picking a few columns here: customer ID, rental ID, amount, payment date, from, payment table. So if I start with this right here, we can see there's 16,000 rows. 16,000 rows. And this is just all the data, right? Everything. This is just all the data. I don't want to see all the data. I want to limit my data. And this is now where you start to use the where clause. Where amount equals 0.99. So we saw that yesterday or Tuesday. This now only brings 2,900 rows. You can see that only the 99 cents amount shows up. All right, we talked about how SQL is a row-based program, so it will basically go row by row, checking for this condition. If it's correct, it prints the column of the row. If it's not, then it will just eliminate the row. It's a filter, basically. So what about if I do and payment date greater than 2006-01-01? What happens if I start to make this kind of compound, or I'm adding more and more conditions to my where clause, because this is still part of the where clause. Sometimes I like to do this to show that we're not quite done with the where clause. I'm just adding more. So if I want to add another one, where, I don't know, what else do we have here? Customer ID, between whatever. So that's basically what the deal is, right? But let's just start with 2 and study that. So we went from 16,000 to 2,000 when I did this first one. Now I'm doing this and I'm doing this. So it's a double. Both conditions I'm checking. That's what the and means. Now I have 53 rows returned. And what does that mean? I still maintain every row must have 99 cents, but now also every row must have, in that same row, you must have a date type that is greater than the first of the year of that year. So you see, that's like, you're checking 2 things. And for each row, again, SQL row-based program, for each row you're checking, do you have an amount of this? Do you also have the date that is? I said, and customer ID is less than 101. Okay, so now we have even less, right? So you're looking at, do you have a customer ID less than this? Check. But also, do you have an amount doesn't matter the order. When you have and, all the conditions must be true. So you see that the data is shrinking. You're getting closer to the precise data you're looking for. So that's what and does for you. Okay. All right. This error message here is something that happens more than often than you would think, but you might be writing quickly, fast, typing fast. You forget a quotation and it gives you error message. So you've noticed that when it comes to dates or even text, like if I had another table, I could open up another table. I could say something like select star from customer when first name. This is a text field. It's a string equals Mary. If it's a string, I need to put those little quotations or I don't know, apostrophe, whatever you want to call it. So you can see there, Mary. So for anything that's a string, we need to put the little apostrophes. For date, we need to put the apostrophe around it. Numerical, so like IDs or amount, these are numerical decimals or whole numbers. We don't need those quotations. You can put them, but you don't need them. So what I'm showing you here is it happens all the time. You forget to put the quotation and it gives you an error message. See that missing, but you have it there. So it throws an error. Hey, 1064, we have an error. All you gotta do is fix that. And then you're good. But just pay attention to those things. If we know what the and does, what does the or do? Now, this is going to become one of those things where I say you don't necessarily need a background in logic or math computing or whatever to do this class, but sometimes you just gotta, have some basic understanding of the terminologies. Terminologies because we don't use or and the same way we do in English when we're speaking. In coding and in logic or and they're pretty different. And as far as what they can do, what do they mean? What is the meaning of or? In this case, or is a way to add same thing, multiple conditions, but it's like and the technical term that I find is there's two things. There's what they call mutually independent, or another word is exclusive. And then the other one is mutually dependent or, or inclusive. So the independent or the exclusive, meaning one condition does not care about the other conditions. It's on its own. That's your or. Whereas this one, it's like all conditions must be true. That's your and, right? Think about whenever you have the and in any function, it's going to be a mutually dependent. Why do I say that? When I go to my query, I could have some dates that are greater than this, but the amounts are not greater than 5. So that's why they don't show up here. Because with and, all the conditions have to go together. They have to all be true. That's what makes it mutually dependent. Right? There's a dependency. All conditions must be true. With or, one condition doesn't care about the others. I have to put a caveat. It's possible that there's overlap, that there could be, but that is not the point. They don't care. But still doesn't matter. It doesn't not the point. Still not the point. Meaning, yeah, I mean, so here, let me show you real quick. With or, let me just go back to this two. Right? Let's go back to these two. Amount greater than 5, payment date. I said with and the two are mutually dependent. They must both be true. So each row, again, SQL is a row-based program language always goes by row. So this row, do you meet both criteria? That's what you have and. If I change this to or, you notice you have a lot more records popped up here. That's because or is like, all right, either or. If you're in the row, if you're above 5, good. I'm gonna print you. Notice that this is 2005. I know it's very hard to tell for those on your phones. This date is 2005-06-50. So that is not greater than this, but it's here because amount is $5.99. Same with this one. Amount is $9.99, even though the date is 05-06-15. So 05 being 2005 is less than, does not pass this. But guess what? But that amount, I just shit, it's not $9.99. Or how about if I can find one, 2006, right here, boom. It says $4.99. That's not greater than 5. It's $4.99. But guess what? The date is 2006-02-14. So do you see what I'm trying to say? Or is either one. Now they could be overlap. So they could be overlap, meaning you could potentially find a scenario where, and I usually don't have luck in finding it quickly. No. Come on. They're only 14, so they're not that many where there's an overlap. But those same 14 that we saw earlier, they're part of this list. You know what I'm saying? Because they meet both of the conditions. Really, you only needed to meet one to be here, right? You only need to meet one. Ah, there we go. So this one, it's $8.97. That's greater than 5. Automatically, you're qualified to be here, right? But it so happens to be that also the date is 2006-02- so you also passed this one. So they could typically get more rows. Typically get more rows returned, right? Because it also includes the ones that would have shown in the end, right? That makes sense. Obviously, just but this one is typically very few. Like typically more conditions add the fewer rows, right? I think that's kind of, again, you don't have to take a class on logic or program code to I just give you a crash course, little summary, but that's what it is. Or versus and. I think in mathematics is something like that. Union versus intersection, whatever the case is. Yeah. But that's it. I'm not even gonna say nothing else about this, you know. But or is and notice how you can even have the same column. When it comes to or, you could have the same column multiple times. You couldn't do that with and. Couldn't do that with and, right? Because theoretically, just logically speaking, if I was to say, which column is this? This is payment. Okay. Customer ID equals 5. I said, or it's fine. Or customer ID equals, what's the other one they use? 11. So this makes sense because remember, it's either or. If it's 5, yeah, good. Or if it's 11, yeah, good. And does not make sense. It just won't, nothing happens. Blank. Why? Because if you think about it, SQL is a row-based program. If you study this row, I'll go to like this one. This row, the ID is equal to 5, but the same row cannot then have the ID equals 11 in the same column. Like this value cannot equal 5 and also equal 11 at the same time. It's just one value. That's why this and does not make sense when it comes to SQL programming code. Now, I know you and I, we speak in English, We can say customers 5 and customer 11 show up, and both people will show up. But this is not English. This is program language. And means for that row, we need both these conditions to be true, and that's not possible. We need to use or. And that's when it happens. 5's come in, 11's come in. Okay. Cool. That's super, 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 super